you start to look around and you're like, okay, I can't do those things, but maybe I need to reinvent myself and think about what I can do and just kind of think outside the box and fill the gaps where you can.
Hey, it's Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy. A lot of us are struggling right now with how to stay open to others when we seem to be living in different realities. I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells with people, but I also don't want to give up on connection. I don't want to give up on leaning into making my community a better place. This is a podcast about staying with the moments we usually want to escape because they're hard, because we feel like we can't make a difference, because they're just tense or awkward. And those are the moments that can honestly really teach us something. So let's get uncomfy.
I had a lot of time to think about what my new life is going to be like. And for me, it always goes back to my why. Why am I still pushing myself? Why am I still doing it? And once you figure out your why, everything else is pretty easy.
Friends, I want you to meet Lieutenant Edmund Fisher. He's been with the Plaquemines Parish Sheriff's Office in the New Orleans area for 18 years. And recently he's been through some pretty dramatic changes and had to make some tough choices. I'm really excited to have him with us today. Lieutenant Fisher, welcome to Uncomfy.
Thank you for having me.
So you were just talking about having spent a lot of time thinking why. Where were you in that moment when you had to start really wondering, like, what's my purpose here?
So I was in an accident. I was the shift lieutenant on night watch. We were out patrolling, and one of my guys had come across some four-wheelers, some ATVs that were riding on the highway. He initiated a traffic stop, and it led to a pursuit. Long story short, I decided I was going to get in front of the pursuit and deploy spike strips in order to stop the four-wheelers. And as I was deploying the strips, one of the bikes swerved and hit me. Hit me on the right side of my body, and yeah, it was pretty bad.
I've seen video. It's pretty catastrophic. It looks like the injuries that you sustained.
Yeah, so it basically split my pelvis in half. My pelvis had to be rebuilt. I had some pretty extensive internal bleeding, which ultimately led to my right leg losing blood flow, and ultimately, had to be amputated.
You lost your leg all the way up to the hip, really?
It's above the knee. It's probably about midway of my femur.
Wow.
It's considered a high above knee.
Yeah. I mean, what do you recall of realizing that your body was going to be significantly different? And you had only just weeks before been a sheriff's lieutenant, right?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I really didn't have options, at the time. I mean, my only option was, have the doctors take the leg, or my body was going to fill up with infection and I probably wouldn't make it. So, I mean, the decision to take it was pretty easy, actually.
What about the choice, though, to sort of lean into recuperation and then to actually
Okay,
decide
yeah.
to go, back to the sheriff's office?
Yeah. So, I mean, man, I had a outpouring of support that was amazing within my community, and I'm forever grateful. And seeing the amount of people that rallied behind me and kind of help get through the tough times, it motivated me more, and kind of like, man, I can't let all these people down. I gotta do something. I gotta try. And it just became a snowball effect, really. From coming home from the hospital and people coming and delivering meals and helping out any kind of way they could. It just, every little bit of outpouring of support really helped. And I don't know where I'd be without the support system that we had.
How this was a couple of years ago, right? How old are your kids, or were they at the time?
So it was May 31st, 2022. My daughter is 15 and my son is 9.
Now, okay.
Yes, correct now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 kids plus your wife at home plus a dog, it sounds like.
Yep.
So good.
Yep.
All right. And you had this community that was backing you. Tell me a little more about some of the things that were meaningful that people did in order to kind of buoy you up.
Well, just reassuring you that, hey, look, even though you lost your leg and you're a little banged up, you're still the same guy. And that's for me, not knowing how this was going to turn out, just the reassurance from your close family and friends that, hey man, you're still the same guy. We still love you. That was huge.
Had you begun to doubt that? I mean, I can't imagine what that's like to sort of feel like your body is
Well,
dramatically different than what it
well,
was, when you formed your identity.
yeah. I mean, you start to question like, okay, well, man, what's my purpose now? Everything that I was doing as far as my career. I was a SWAT team operator and a lieutenant on a night shift running a crew of cops. To now it's like, man, what am I gonna do? Like, I can't do any of those things anymore. So what's my purpose? And quickly you start to look around and you're like, okay, I can't do those things, but maybe I need to reinvent myself and think about what I can do and just kind of think outside the box and fill the gaps where you can.
What can you recall about that process of trying to think outside the box and identifying gaps that you could fill?
Yeah, so specifically, like for instance, the sheriff's office, we really didn't have a drone program per se. So I was like, man, that's something I could do, right? And here we are. Now I'm FAA certified for drones and heading up that stuff. So it's really just like I said, thinking outside the box and kind of, hey, what can I do now? And not think about what you can't do anymore, because that's the past. You think about what you can do, and it looks totally different than it did before. But everything is different. Your body's different, your abilities are different, everything's different. But for me, it always goes back to my why. Why am I still pushing myself? Why am I still doing it? And like I said, once you figure out your why, everything else is pretty easy.
And what's your why?
Definitely my family, my wife and kids.
Did faith play a role in this for you at all? Are you a person of faith?
Yeah, man. So I grew up in a Catholic family, went to Catholic school my whole life. And when you go through something like this, you really question your faith. And I had some times where I talked to God and asked why. Why are you doing this to me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? And, you quickly find out that he's in total control, and you just you got to accept it. You got to submit to what's happening and accept it and figure out, okay, well, how he's got a plan. I don't know what it is, but we're going to do it.
Thanks for sharing that. Is there anything from your background, do you think, that in hindsight sort of prepared you to have this really resilient approach to what's happened to you?
I don't know if it's any one particular thing. I would hope to think that it's a combination of things. I served in the military, in the Coast Guard, and that kind of set a good foundation. I was raised with some pretty good people. My grandfather in particular, he was pretty resilient himself. And I often think about him and the things that he went through. It crosses my mind a lot, like, how would he handle this and what would he do?
Would you mind telling me a little more about your grandfather, what he went through?
Yeah, so my grandfather, he worked offshore. He was a rig foreman, and he had to retire early because of an injury that he sustained on the job. So he went through some depression, having to retire early and stuff like that. And then eventually they discovered he had prostate cancer. He was in remission for a while, and then it came back in his esophagus, and just seeing the battle that he went through fighting cancer.
What was it about his response to those challenges that was so impressive to you that you wanted to emulate?
I mean, it was just, don't quit type of attitude, just keep pushing and we're going to do what we got to do to keep going.
Were you close? I mean, did you get to see him very often or be in touch with him?
Yeah. He was actually the best man in my wedding. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
So do you think about what you're passing on to your kids or what you're modeling for them?
I think every day, they look at me and I would hope they look at me and see kind of what I saw in my grandpa, like look at me and look up to me and be like, hey, look, Dad's pushing. We want to be like that, and it takes a little bit of grit and a little bit of little bit of stubbornness, and I try to instill it in my kids.
So how's the recovery going now? What kind of milestones do you feel like you've crossed,
Pretty
and where are
good,
you headed?
pretty good, pretty good. So I've had a lot of setbacks, but it's going good. I've recently started doing some rehabilitation with walking unassisted, without a cane, which is pretty big. I mean, people don't realize how fortunate they are to just be able to walk around with two free hands and just carry things or open a door or it's just the little things that you don't think about.
That's great. Congratulations. That's a
Thank you, thank you.
hard fought. So you wear a prosthetic and you're able to now at least sort of get around
Yes.
without a cane.
So I have a full prosthetic, and I do get in the wheelchair sometimes, but I try to stay away from it. I look at it as, for me, when I see myself in the wheelchair, it kind of depresses me, and it's like I don't belong here, and that pushes me to kind of get up and try to walk or you know get around as best I can.
I know you haven't done very many interviews
No.
of this nature. I really appreciate you being willing to talk with us. What would you like people to take away from your story, if there is a lesson to be learned here?
Man, I never would have once thought that I'd be in the position that I'm in, and it it, it all happened so fast. I look back at some of the things that I was doing right before my accident, and I'm like, I would have never thought, like, you know, I, life was so good, like life was great, like we were thriving, and then all of a sudden the door just slammed on our face, and it was like, what are we gonna do? But then you kind of realize, like, all right, we gotta keep going. I mean, this isn't over. We still have healthy kids. We still have, some health. We still have a strong marriage. We still have our careers. We still have our families. There's still a lot to be thankful for.
Lieutenant Edmund Fisher is an 18-year veteran of the Plaquemines Parish Sheriff's Office that's in the New Orleans area. He is currently managing the department's field training officers. Lieutenant Fisher, I can't thank you enough for sharing with us your story today.
Thank you.
And thank you for getting uncomfy with us today. I'd love to hear if you've had an experience thinking outside the box about how you can contribute in your own family or workplace or community. Was it uncomfortable? How did you navigate that? I'd love to hear your story. Email uncomfy@byu.edu or find us on social media to continue the conversation. We are at uncomfy.podcast on Instagram. Uncomfy is a BYU radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it, and the team includes Maggie Mathis and Abby Karras. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. Hey, friends, quick recommendation for your podcast queue. Do you remember that movie that you had on VHS or DVD that you watched so many times it wore out? Well, movies didn't just entertain us, they shaped who we are. And there's a new BYU Radio original podcast called Voiceover, Movies That Move Us. I think you're really going to like. Film Studies PhD Heather Bigley hosts the show. She has guests on, and they talk about movie moments that shifted perspective, that sparked self-reflection or stirred their souls. Plus, they give recommendations for movies you might want to check out. You can listen to Voiceover, Movies That Move Us, now on BYU Radio or anywhere you find your podcasts.